It is eaten up.
So what's in there?
What's in where?
In there.
That's the remains of my soup. Okay, what we're making today is cream of onion soup for 3 people. What you need, the salt. What we're making today is cream of onion soup for 3 people. What you'll need is a saucepan, with a flat-headed spoon, wooden spoon, some onions, some stock, some flour, some seasoning, and some butter.
What kind of stock?
Well, it can be any stock. Vegetable stock, chicken stock, beef stock, but not fish stock. Now, to peel the onion, you first take the root off as little as possible, then the stem, and then peel. The reason for this is that we want the root to stay in one piece to hold the rest of the leaves of the onion together while you cut them up.
So which side of the onion to peel it from?
Peel from the top to the bottom. You dispose of that now in the bin there, that's fine. Right, to cut the onion up, from the root, go down through the middle of the onion, lay it flat, put the root to your left, and then simply cut with your knife. And look at the knife, it's very thin there, because that's the cutting edge, is thick there, so it's tapered. If you turn the knife slightly away from you, you can't cut yourself. Okay? We'll repeat that action. Turn the knife slightly away from you and cut to make the leaves or the threads of onion as long as possible. When you get to a small part like that at the end, it's quite okay to turn it on the side and cut it that way.
So when you're chopping, you're keeping the nose of your knife on the board, right?
Keep the nose of the knife on the board all the time, slightly turning away from you, and you can use your knuckle to guide it. This is all prepared. What I've done, I've taken 2 onions, we've got them ready, about 1½ tablespoons of flour, already got a mixed seasoning which should be already in the kitchen. That's 3 of sugar, 2 of salt, 1 of pepper.
Sugar?
Yes. That's your standard seasoning for most things. And then we've got about 1½ ounce of butter which you put in your pan to get melted, to sweat the onions off. Don't brown the onions, they're just going to be sweated off. Don't burn the butter, just melt the butter. Don't want to get any brown in it at all. Just melt the butter right down. And then we add the onions. Now, as I say, the thing to do is to make sure you don't brown the onions. They've got to just be sweated off nice and slow there. So it's going to take a little while. It's going to take 5 or 10 minutes to sweat them down and get them nice and soft, because they don't go very soft when you've made the soup. And also, onions are very harsh when you try them. They burn you in your mouth, and you've got that's kind of acid, strong acid in there, and that is volatile. So when you sweat it off in the pan like this, you get rid of that acid, because it's volatile, it vapors up and gives it a better flavour altogether for the onions.
So it's not bitter?
It's not bitter, yeah. Now I'm going to put the lid on that and leave it for a few minutes and keep stirring it every now and again. Now the onions have lost their pungent smell.
How long have they been in there now? About 10
They've
minutes?
been about 5 or 10 minutes, yes, 10 minutes. They've lost their pungent smell and they are nice and soft. So you can now add the flour.
So did you have the lid on the whole time they were cooking?
No. Don't want the lid too much on it. Every few minutes you go and stir it. You've got to make sure it doesn't burn in or brown in any way. Mix the flour well into the onions. Then you're going to add the stock. Now, how much stock? It all depends on how thick you want your soup. At the moment, I'm making this soup without chopped parsley because one of the persons don't want parsley in the soup. But you can put chopped parsley in the soup when it's finished, or, as I've done on this occasion, I've put about a teaspoonful of basil in it, not basilic, basil, into the stock. And now I'm going to add the stock to this roux. When you add it, you put 1/3 in, and if you noticed, I've had my saucepan off the stove for a few minutes so it's cooled down a bit. So you must cool your saucepan down slightly. Mix this in without any heat added to it. Mix it in off the stove till you get a complete combination of the flour and the onions and the stock, and you don't see any large lumps. You will get lumps obviously because you've got lumps of onion in there, but you don't want to see chunks of onion and flour all clumped together. Keep going with it until you get it nice and smooth.
Now what happens if you hadn't taken it off the stove and put it in there?
Well, you probably would get lumps then because the roux would be too hot and it would cook the flour before you got a chance to mix the flour in with the stock. So drop more. You can usually add the stock in three lots, but it's better if you can take a less amount each time. The least amount you put in, the better the mixture at this stage. Now, when you've got to this stage, it's getting too slack, what they call too runny. And when it's runny like that, your spoon won't break the lumps down because they'll jump around the edge of your spoon because there's no resistance there. So now you have to put a little more heat on to start to thicken it up more, so that if there are any lumps in there, the spoon will break them down. Okay, turn it up, heat up a little bit more now, but you must keep it on the move because at this stage it's quite easily going to firm up in the bottom of the saucepan and stick to the bottom of the saucepan and burn. So you must keep it on the move all the time.
So are you going to let it boil now?
No, I'm not going to let it boil. I'm just going to bring it up enough to thicken the sauce slightly, and that breaks down any lumps that may be in there. So you've got to just get a bit more resistance in the sauce.
It looks like it's thickening up a bit now.
It is thickening up now all the time, yes, because the stock is hot and the roux was hot, not boiling hot, but it was hot enough to start it setting, and it won't properly set until it's boiled. So I'm getting good thick sauce now coming up, and I'm fairly confident that there's no lumps in there.
So what happens with the fat and the starch in the flour when you're doing this?
Well, what happens really is that the fat separates the grains of flour so that they mix better with the fluid, with the liquid that you're going to put into it. If you didn't do that, you find that your flour would clump together very quickly when the liquid is added to it. So you've got to partially cook the outside of each grain of flour, partially cook it, not cook it, but partially cook it, and wrap the butter around the grain of flour so that when the stock goes onto it, each grain will separate quite easily.
And then it doesn't get lumpy.
And it doesn't get lumpy. Well, it will get lumpy if you don't just stir it, as I've said. You've got to keep stirring it just the same. But it helps it not to get lumpy. Now we can turn the gas up quite high to get it boiling. As I say, the amount of stock you put in will vary, and it depends on you, your taste. And in particular, it depends on the shape of your body, of course, whether you want your body one shape or another shape. So, okay, that's about a pint and a quarter, pint and a half of stock gone in there. Now I've left a little bit of room because it's going to thicken up now, thicker than I want it to be. Because you can either have the soup finished like that, in which case you would add some more stock, or you can add something like milk, put some milk in it. Again, this will make your body change shape. Or you can add cream, which will make it change even more.
Yeah.
So there you are, that's your soup complete.
Very
The
good.
only thing now that we've got to do is to taste it. But before I taste it, I know I'm going to want some seasoning. That's the mixed seasoning. Salt, pepper, sugar, already mixed in the kitchen, standard. I know I'm going to need some of it.
So you said you had about how many ounces of butter?
About 1.5 ounces of butter.
And how would that equate to tablespoons or teaspoons of butter, do you think?
Probably a level tablespoonful of butter.
Okay, and what about flour? How much flour?
About 1.5 tablespoons of flour.
Which is how many ounces?
Roughly about 1 to 2 ounces, it depends.
Okay.
About 1.5 ounces. You can say that most liquids, soups, sauces, require about 2 ounces of flour to the pint. Taking a basic sauce like bechamel, it's 2 ounces to the pint.
And 2 ounces of butter also.
Equal quantities,
Yeah.
yes. A roux is equal quantities. To finish the soup off, you can either leave it like that, or if you want it thinner, you can put some more stock with it, as I say. I'm going to finish it with some milk, but before I do, I need to taste it. It's beautiful. Right, we'll put a drop of milk in. Again, depends on what you want. I've put about half a cup of milk in there. What it does, it changes its colour, makes it look more like a creamy soup. But if you don't want to get fat, don't put it in. The other thing about it is now is the time, before you serve it, just before you serve it, you put the chopped parsley in. And very often it's nice when you put it in a dish for somebody to eat, chop parsley on cream, put a spoonful of cream in, then the chopped parsley on top of the cream. It looks quite nice then to present it. That's all there is to it. Very easy. Well, I'm now going to take a chance and eat some of my soup. It's a bit hot, so oh, it's delicious.
What do you think, Martin?
Lovely.
Lovely.